In the previous lessons, we've been looking at one-dimensional arrays, but C# allows multi-dimensional arrays, anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 dimensions, although generally anything past 3 dimensions is pretty hard to keep track of, or to even understand in your head. In this course, though, we're only going to look at 2-dimensional arrays. So let's get started looking at how to declare and initialize a 2-dimensional array, and how to assign data to a 2-dimensional array that's been declared but not initialized. A 2-dimensional array starts out just like a 1-dimensional array with the data type and an open bracket. But rather than just a closed bracket, we have to put a comma to indicate that this array is going to be 2 dimensions, rows and columns, just like a spreadsheet. Then you have the name of the array, followed by the constructor, the data type, and then the number of rows and the number of columns. So for example, this particular array is a 5-row, 5-column array. You can have more rows than columns, more columns than rows, any combination that you want or need, but you have to declare them in the brackets. Alternatively, let me comment this line out. I can also not only declare the array, but initialize it in the same line, just like we can do with the single-dimension array, by providing a list. In this list, I have inner lists that consist of the rows. So here I've created a 2-row, 2-column array. So my first row has a grade 88 and 75, which is delimited by curly braces. Then I put a comma, then the second row starts another curly brace and 2 more grades. Then I close off the whole list and then a semicolon, just like so. So if you know in advance the data that's going to be stored in the 2-dimensional array, then it makes sense to go ahead and provide an initialization list for that array. However, if you don't and you want to assign data to the array, we can do that using our random number generator or any other means that you want. Let's add a random number object to our program, and then let's write a loop. And it's not just a single loop, it's a nested for loop to do this. We need an outer loop to control the rows. So we're going to travel from the first row, first column, to the last row, last column. So the way we do that is we create a nested for loop. In this case, because we know the array is 5 by 5, we'll say row less than 5, plus row. We could have had constants and variables there also. In the next lesson, I'll show you how to determine that programmatically. Then we need a curly brace to open this. Then for the inner loop, the inner for loop, we'll use col or column as our control variable. It's in this loop that we're going to set the value of grades. So we'll write grades sub row comma col equals rand next 101, like so. And actually, I didn't have to use curly braces for the outer loop. This is all just one statement, but it might make it a little clearer what's going on if you do put it in braces, but you didn't have to. That loop will assign values to the array. We can reuse this loop, and of course I understand that we can also have methods to do this just like we did in the last lesson, and we'll see that later. Right now I'm just trying to show you the basics of working with 2-dimensional arrays. So we can use this same loop, we'll copy it and paste it in, and then rather than assign data, we can write data out to the console. Now understand that there's going to be a problem with this. I'm just telling you in advance. It's not a serious problem. But I want to go ahead and run the program, then I'll tell you what the problem is, although you'll see it when you see the output. Okay, well the output clearly shows that we didn't break it up into rows and columns. It's all one long row. What we needed to do is this. We needed to add a console write line after the inner loop, so that when we go across all the columns of a row, which is what's happening right here, then we want to write a new line before we do the next row. So adding that console write line just outside the inner loop should put us into rows and columns. Let's take a look. And there we go. The important point is understanding how to use nested for loops to either assign data to the array or to access the elements in proper row column order. And adding this console write line at the end of the inner loop, or just outside of it, allows us to see the display with the rows in the correct place. So to summarize, 2-dimensional arrays are declared with a comma in the first set of brackets, and then the rows and columns in the second set of brackets. Or alternatively, you can declare the array and initialize it with an initialization list that puts the rows where the rows are in curly brace delimited form with a comma separating each row. And then if you're going to assign the data programmatically, then you're going to write a nested for loop with the outer loop controlling the rows and the inner loop controlling the columns, and then assigning data that way. And that's also used for accessing the array, as we demonstrated where we printed out the values of the two-dimensional array. So those are the basics of working with two-dimensional arrays. In the next lesson, we'll look at other topics that are important when dealing with two-dimensional arrays.